How many tarot decks do you need? Well, it really depends. How many freaking tarot decks do you want? There's a lot of tarot decks on the market. But here's the thing that I say. If you are using tarot for divine purposes in order to predict any elements of the future, basically all you really need is one solid, very, very good esoteric and exoteric tarot deck. But if you are doing tarot in order to project your own inner psyche, to free associate, in order to do any kind of psychological self-growth work versus less predictive readings, I would actually recommend to have as many tarot decks as you desire, because the more you have access to a variety of different images, to a variety of different deck creators, the better off you're going to be, because each one is going to be a different language and a different doorway into different aspects of your psyche. So if you're doing psychological work, as many as you want. Hi everyone, so I wanted to do a follow-up video to the short clip you just saw that I posted on my Instagram, because I thought that it would be interesting to talk a little bit more in depth about this concept of how many tarot decks do we really need. I think it's especially interesting today because I see so many people have gotten rid of their decks. Recently I put a tarot challenge on Instagram, and then Brian Papa Squirrel, is it Papa Squirrel or just Squirrel? Brian messaged me and he said, "Oh, I'm so excited to see you on Instagram." And I said, "Well, you know, I hope you'll do the challenge." And he said, "You know, hey, don't you know I got rid of all of my decks?" So I think there's a lot of people getting rid, which I think it's really great. I think if that's something for you, that's really, go for it. I think that to each its own, really. I also hear a lot about depths here and those type of things. And so I just wanted to share a little bit more my perspective, my worldview on those concepts. As I said in the short clip, I really do believe that if you using tarot for divinatory meanings in order to divine, you truly, and I think a lot of us will agree on this, one really just needs one good solid deck. Whatever the deck for you, or maybe the deck that you're most familiar with in order to do tarot readings. One, of course, doesn't need to have 50, 60, 70, 100, 500 tarot decks in order to be a good tarot reader. One deck will totally suffice. As a psychologist, I also know that for me personally, apart from doing daily draws, which I do using those tarot deck, which is my favorite tarot deck, a lot of times in order to do any kind of more deeper psychological type of reading, what I mean by psychological type of readings, by the way, is, well, let's define it. Because what is psychological tarot readings? Because if you think about it, any reading is psychological in a sense, right? It's impossible to divorce psychology from tarot readings. So I think psychology is always going to be present. What I mean by psychological, I suppose, is when we're doing tarot readings with a deeper purpose than just to divine, maybe with the purpose of learning more about ourselves, in a sense of maybe going deeper into ourselves, maybe doing readings for some kind of self-growth, self-help. A lot of times what I will do is I will use different tarot decks in order to project certain elements of what I'm going through and see what those projections tell me about myself. So it's really, the way I see it psychologically, is as a tool of learning more about who I am. And this is where the concept of then having a lot of tarot decks becomes very instrumental, and I want to explain why. Our psyche, our unconsciousness loves images. It loves imagery and the language of images. This is why primarily we dream in images, because our psyche communicates symbolically. This is why people do dream interpretation, because symbolically, when a psyche uses particular image, for example, an image of a car, for example, it symbolizes something else psychologically to us. So whereas in the real world, a car is a vehicle of transportation, in a dream life, a car could mean other elements. It could be starting something new. It could be an element of an anxiety. It could be so many other things. So what I'm trying to say is that our psyche, our inner unconsciousness especially, loves, adores images, and the way it uses a language, a bridge to communicate with our consciousness is through imagery. For that reason, the more we allow our psyche to be exposed to different images, the better off it's going to be able to communicate with us. Or saying the other way, the more clearer the mode of communication is going to be. For that reason, having a lot of tarot decks, a lot is very subjective. I personally have about 50 both tarot and oracle decks, and that's plenty for me. Somebody else may feel like they need more than that. So having a variety, there you go, better word. Having a variety of different images and being exposed to different types and forms of images for psyche, I think is very, very instrumental, especially when you're doing a deeper work where you're projecting things. And the way I like to project onto the images is I will usually, instead of asking, for example, a question, I will start off with something I already know, and then I will ask something along the lines of, what am I not seeing here? What am I being blind to? What are my blind spots? And then I will free associate and project under the images. And that way the images, the variety of images helps me understand much more deeper myself. But again, if you're using tarot just for the reading to divine, one deck will suffice. In a way, I think that speaking about having access to a variety of images is also a way to promote consumerism. I think consumerism in of itself is an interesting topic. I don't think that all consumerism is bad personally, and I also don't think that necessarily stopping purchasing things in one's life is also a way of having a depth year for me personally. For me personally, a depthful year is, it's not so much about stopping to accumulate things. For example, for me, I accumulate a lot of books. I buy a lot of books. So for me, it's not a matter of not buying books anymore. A depthful year for me in a relationship to any accumulation of things is to have a deeper perspective, have a deeper understanding into what is my relationship to those things? Why do I need those things in my life? And what purpose accumulation of those things serves in my life? So for me, a depthful year is more about this inner perspective. It's actually more about inner growth more than anything else. Let me give you an example. So when I got into tarot YouTube years ago, I didn't know that there were all these indie tarot decks, and I went for probably 2 years. I went into this like insatiable appetite where I would just buy a lot of tarot decks, and I probably went through about 300 tarot decks over the course of the time, because I would buy and it'll turn out to be not for me, and then I'll just re-gift them or resell them or whatever. But the point being is that I went through a period where I would accumulate a lot of things because it was new to me, it was exciting to me, I really enjoyed it. And there came a time where I gained a deeper perspective for myself, where I realized that having so many things, so many tarot decks in this case, actually gave me quite a bit of anxiety, because I'm the type of person that when it comes to tarot specifically, I like to have a smaller, more specific types of tarot decks. So that's a deeper perspective. That's a depthful perspective. It wasn't just me stopping to buy tarot decks because of consumerism, or because, I don't know, or because for some reason I thought it was bad to have so many tarot decks. No, it just was a growth of perspective. My perspective shifted where I had realizations that I personally didn't need it. It didn't serve me. It wasn't what I was looking for. Now, let me give you a different example. When it comes to books, I to this day accumulate shitload of books. I get probably 20 books delivered to my house every month. I go through books like a crazy person. I drop books at the Goodwill all the time. The point I'm trying to make is that this is an area of my life where I continue to accumulate and buy and have more of. And I have a different relationship, different depthful relationship with books. With books, I have a different inner realization. It pleases me. I enjoy it. I like reading them. Each book brings me something else. And I feel right now where I'm in my life that I need more different books. Therefore, this process works for me. Whereas with tarot, I have a different process. It's about 50 decks, and I'm satisfied, and that's what really fits me, and that's what gives my psyche enough images to work with. But with the books, it's a different matter. So the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes in our life, when we have a depthful year, we can have a depthful relationship to certain things because our perspective has shifted. And to other things, such as books for me, for example, it will be a very different relationship, albeit also a very depthful one. So it's a very interesting discussion, I think, because I see people talk about it in different ways and how things mean different for them. And I wanted to share my perspective on how these things and what they mean for me personally in terms of tarot cards and things like that. I know that there's a lot of people who also come to their own inner perspectives that they don't really need that many. And there's some people who really enjoy it the way I enjoy and continue to enjoy purchasing so many books and have so many books lying around. But in general, if you are, or if one uses tarot in order to do any kind of this psychological depth-oriented work, I personally think the more access to images you have, and again, the more is subjective, right? For me, 50 decks is more. It's plenty, it's enough, because each one of the decks that I have is very, very different from the other. But for somebody else, more could be 100 tarot decks, could be 200 tarot decks. So to each its own, everybody's so different. But it's an interesting concept about what purpose tarot serves in our lives. Somebody recently commented under this video on Instagram saying that to them, tarot is like books of a library, right? And I can see that. I can see how that would be for somebody. The way books are for me. Absolutely. Why shouldn't be? But it's an interesting discussion, and I would love to hear what do you think about it. I know that there's a lot, even though I'm not on tarot YouTube as much these days at all, I still see things and how people talk about things on Instagram quite a bit because I'm on there much more often. And so I'm picking up on energetically how people are talking about it. Using more, using less, buying more, buying less, words such as detoxing their collection. And I think these are all great conversations. I think it all really comes down to individualistic experiences and how each individual feels and what purpose it serves for them. Again, for me, depth means a much deeper shift in perspective. It's not for me so much just stopping the behavior, because the purchasing, the accumulation of things is a behavior. The behavior arises out of some deeper necessity or some deeper meaning why we do, just like my purchasing of books arising out of my deeper maybe need to know more, maybe need to learn more, maybe it comes from my insatiable appetite for knowledge. And the way I see that insatiable appetite as really good in my life. It benefits my life, and therefore I continue with the behavior. For somebody else, particular behavior may be arising out of something else that actually gives them tension. Just like for me, having those 100 tarot decks, actually that behavior led to tension within me because it just drove me nuts. It's like so many tarot decks. It made me very uncomfortable. But 50 decks is totally fine for me. So it's very subjective, very personal. I'd love to hear your experiences because, like I said, it is so individualistic. Let me know if you use tarot for psychological readings. If you do, what kind of images do you prefer to work with? Do you like to have very drastic shifts in the images that you tend to have in your collection? What are your primary decks that you tend to use psychologically, and why? Do they tend to be more abstract decks? Recently, there's this tarot deck that came out. Oh my God, I don't know the name of it, but it's been showing on Instagram. It's basically a color imagery of thoughts, but it's basically color representation of each card. All it is just a color, and it's quite abstract, but quite evocative and quite emotive, in a sense that you can derive and get that energy from that color. And I think that's really interesting and very, very different. So it's interesting what we tend to be drawn for. When I work psychologically, I like something that's a little bit more storytelling for me personally, where I can project and tell a story. I love Lucy Cavendish, Alice in Wonderland, Oracle cards for that reason. Things like that just work really well for my psyche because I'm trying to drop away from my cerebral mind. So share below, let me know what are your thoughts on this. Maybe do VR to this video if you would like to get engaged in a conversation and talk about it more. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, hoping everybody's doing well and being healthy. Thanks.